In this video I'm going to look at flying the Airbus A320 using manual inputs into the autopilot. It won't use the FMC in any elaborate way, but we will need to use the FMC to put in our ILS radio frequency for our landing. Please note that this is not necessarily technically correct way of flying the aircraft, but it will give a basic idea of how the aircraft operates on the autopilot and give us a general feel for the aircraft. The first thing to do is to load the aircraft with fuel. Now for this you must use the fuel loader program that comes with the Airbus A320. Using the fuel loading system built into FSX will not work on this aircraft. So we shall put some fuel in it, just a small loading, 25% or so, because I'm just going to do a circuit of the airfield. If I go to the Start button, All Programs, then there is an Airbus X Fuel Planner icon automatically put onto the desktop. So I shall now click that. When the Fuel Planner opens, you will see this panel, and you can set passenger loading and cargo loading with these two sliders. So set a fairly low passenger loading. It's not very technical on this one, we're just doing something for a simple test flight. At the top of the panel is a switch to advanced mode. Clicking that opens the panel even larger, and now you can set other parameters. At the moment it is showing departure as EGFF and arrival at EGFF, and I shall put in here a distance. We'll give ourselves 200 miles, far more than we need, but just to be safe side, I'll put 250 miles. $250, and you'll notice that all of these figures have altered automatically, and we have a fuel loading at the bottom here of 7,000 kilograms, and I now say load fuel. Fuel has been loaded. Now it's important to note that all of those figures are actually automatically input into the FMC, but we are not going to be using that at this particular moment in time, but we are only going to use that simple fuel loading, passenger loading, so that the aircraft has sufficient fuel for a very short flight. The rest of the data as such is not needed for this particular flight. Now I'm back in the aircraft, which is in a cold and dark state, and I'm going to use a very special feature of this aircraft by looking at the two FMCs, on the left and on the right. If I zoom in on the right, it has an option for the state of the aircraft. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to select aircraft state, and I'm going to set it for takeoff state. This will put the aircraft ready to fly. It saves me loading up everything from cold and dark.
Safety right position, hold, southwest 1322.
Next, for simplicity, I'm going to select World, go to Airport, Cardiff, active runway, and it will put my aircraft ready to fly on the centre line at runway 30. Now, as the aircraft has been selected for a ready to fly state, the flaps will have been preset at flaps 2. But in order to show exactly what happens here, We're looking at the flap indicator here, which I've set back to 0 flaps. I'm going to put flaps 2 again. I select flaps down, flaps 1, and flaps 2. External view of the wing area. Flaps 2 have now been set. Flaps 2. Now I'm going to preset some data into the autopilot. I'm going to select speed, left click, right click. I can now see right click 100. I'm going to rotate that with the mouse wheel and I'm going to set it for 240. Heading, left click, right click. Heading is now showing 300, which is the heading of the runway. We leave that as it is. And my set altitude initially 7,000. Left click, right click. Rate of climb, left click, right click. I'm going to set my rate of climb for 2,000 feet per minute. None of this is active at the moment because the autopilot buttons here have not been set. This is just a pre-takeoff setting. Now we are ready for takeoff. Just as in any other takeoff, things are going to happen rather quickly. I'm going to estimate our liftoff speed, rollout speed at about 140 knots. And our climb out speed will gradually increase to around 230, 240 knots, which is the speed that I have set here. As I climb out, I am going to reduce the flaps as required, and I am then going to level off at 7,000 feet. The procedure will be for me to accelerate down the runway, and I will select the CLB position on the throttle, that is climb, and is the most efficient for fuel. I will then lift off at the end of the runway, and once I'm in a positive rate of climb, gear up, and as my speed increases and I am safely in flight, I will then select the autopilot on and the auto throttle on, and I will continue to fly in a straight line heading 300 until I reach 7,000 feet. Okay, here we go. Brakes on, lever to climb position, engines power up, release brakes. Watch my speed here. Ignore the fuel level signs at the moment. $80 knots. 100. 120. 140. Knees back on the stick. Lift off. Hold the nose at about 10 to 15 degrees. Gear up, positive rate of climb. Flaps 1. Now we're in general flight. Autopilot on. Auto throttle is already set. and the aircraft is now in auto flight. We're now reaching 180 knots. .220 knots, flaps up. We're now clean flaps, passing through 2,700, 800 feet, heading 300 degrees, climbing to our set altitude of 7,000 feet. Now just passing through 6,600 feet, and the aircraft should now level off at 7,000 feet. We are now level at 7,000 feet, still heading 300 degrees and approaching 240 knots. Okay. Time to check our instruments. We are now at 240 knots. We are at 7,000 feet and we're heading more or less 300 degrees. The autopilot shows us that our heading is set for autopilot, our altitude is set for autopilot, and our speed is set for autopilot. Let's now take a look at our autopilot settings. We are at the moment heading 300 degrees. If I use the scroll wheel and set that for 270 degrees, you will see the aircraft turning to 270 degrees. Now will automatically level out when it reaches 270 degrees. Looking once more at our instruments, we can now see we're heading 270 degrees. Let's now see our altitude settings. Back to the autopilot. And let's dial in 6,000 feet. Then select our rate of descent by clicking with the left mouse and scrolling minus 1,000 feet per minute, and the aircraft is descending.
58 contact approach 125.5.
We're descending here now, 6,006, 6,005.
126 reduced speed to 190.
A little bit of turbulence, as you can see. 6,004. And when it reaches 6,000, it will level off once again. 6.3, 6.2. The autopilot will make this a very gentle transition into the various altitude settings. 6.1, 6,000. 6,000. Still at 240 knots. Heading 270. Okay, let's just do that once again. We dial in a heading now to 200 degrees. The aircraft will turn.
Turn right heading 180, descend to maintain 5,000.
Right 180, descend to maintain 5,000.
And I shall dial in an altitude of 4,500.
AC 4668, descend to maintain.
I'll make it 5,000 at the moment.
210.
And then descent rate
7926, contact approach
of
125.5.
700 feet per minute.
25.5 is 9.2.
The autopilot will now take us to the new level at a very gradual rate of descent. Still 240 speed. If I dial that down to 225, you'll hear the engine noise decrease as the throttle is automatically reduced to obtain that new speed setting.
United 1662, flighting 180.
Here the speed is now decreasing to 220. The altitude is coming down to 5,000 feet. And I'm heading to the 220 setting.
AC 4561, the approach, get it.
We're now in a nice, smooth, level flight, heading down the Bristol Channel. Okay, now I know these speeds and altitudes are not necessarily very accurate. This is just for us to get used to using the autopilot. So I'm now going to turn heading to 120, which is 180 degrees from my takeoff. So I will be flying back parallel to the initial takeoff run. 120. Nice gentle turn over the Bristol Channel and back towards Somerset.
4561, flighting 180.
Heading 188 for setting.
Leveling out now at 120 degrees. Leveled out now, heading 120 degrees, altitude 5,000 feet, speed 220 knots. Now I've paused the flight for a moment or two here just so that we can look at the next bit of setting the FMC for our ILS approach. If we look down at the FMCs, and we're going to look this time at the left hand one. This is the active one for the pilot. There is a button here which is marked Radio Nav, Rad Nav. Click that button. A new screen appears here and it asks us for, if I zoom in a bit more, the VOR and frequency for VOR 1 and our course, ILS frequency and course and various other things. We are interested in the ILS frequency and its course. In order to put data into this, we are going to use the numeric pad and the alphanumeric pad here, and we are then going to enter it into it with these various buttons. Now, for the scratch pad here to be active, the flight simulator must be running. We cannot do this in pause. So we're going to enter the ILS frequency and our course here. The ILS for Cardiff runway 30 is 110.70. So 110.70. Enter that with the ILS frequency here. And it now asks me for a course. The heading of that runway 030 is 300. So that's 300. Enter.
Stop with 49, turn right heading 340.
We now have our ILS frequency and course set in the FMC.
Digit 588, radio speed 210.
Now, as we're crossing over the coast of Somerset, let's take a little look at our main display of the map here, because this is slightly different to the GPS map in other aircraft. Here is EGFF, that is the airport we are heading for. We are presently heading, however, in this direction. There are two switches to the left of the autopilot here. This one gives us range. It's presently set for 40 miles. Left click will take it to 20. Right click will take it to 60, 80, 160. So I can see farther away from me or closer to me as I require. This shows me in map view in various forms. I can have a plan, an arc, navigation, VOR, LS.
3,000, Southwest 9960.
At the moment it is in nav.
Citrus 588, turn right.
Now at this time I'm going to continue flying on my present course parallel to the runway at Cardiff but into Somerset. I'm going to give myself a good few miles away from the airport before I turn, to give myself plenty of time to turn and intersect runway 030 at EGFF.
Southwest 1993, descend to maintain 2,500, turn left heading of 23.
Okay, I'm going to now descend to 3,000 feet. Nice gentle descent, 600-700 feet a minute. I'm going to reduce my speed to 220. And I'm going to begin a slow turn back towards Cardiff. Presently doing 120, I will turn to 90.
Evidence 2455, Southwest 1993, turn left 180, Donald Oak. Left 180, Donald Oak, Southwest 1996. Citrus 588, turn right heading 130, Donald Oak. Turn Donald Oak, Southwest 1993, you're 4.
Now, if I look at my display here, I have lost EGFF. That's because I'm now further away than the radius that I've set here at 40. I'm going to set the radius at 80, and I can now see EGFF here. So I need to eventually turn until I'm heading towards the general direction of EGFF. We're going to alter my heading again.
Southwest 1993, contact tower 94, thank you.
I'm now heading at 45 degrees. I'm doing a nice gentle turn.
Turn left heading 330, descend to maintain 4,000.
As the aircraft turns, you will see this rotating compass will also turn. This is the selected heading I've set at 45 degrees. EGFF is here. So I need to turn even further. I shall alter my heading less.
Right heading 050,
I'm going to bring it round to around 20 degrees, 15 degrees. Let the aircraft swing gently to that new heading.
40, maintain 170 to 5 DME, contact tower 19. Back 10 right.
Okay, I know the final heading of the runway is 300 degrees and I want to approach that heading at approximately 30 degrees from it in order to make my final turn. So I'm now going to reset my heading so that it is 330.
Chopper 49, 5,000 India.
The aircraft will now turn and level off at a heading of 330 at 3,000 feet. Okay, I'm now going to descend to 2,000 feet, which is a little bit low, but for this test flight it will be fine.
3358.
And
I'm going to reduce my speed to 175.
926, reduce speed to 190.
So to 190, Delta 926.
And set flaps 1.
Set for 8, Charlie.
Safety 4668, near the pressure.
Now at this point the ILS should intercept, but at this point in time I'm not perfectly clear on how I do that. So I'm going to alter my heading here to 300, which is the heading of the runway. And I should have Cardiff in front of it. It should be visually able to see it. I'm now going to reduce my speed to 165. And here is Cardiff. Now from this point, at the moment, I'm going to have to make a manual landing.
4181, turn left heading 250.
I can check in the external view that I am in line with the runway, and now I'm going to reduce my speed, increase my flaps, put the gear down and make a manual landing.
Alright, 130 heading, get us 3,000, here's up 15 round, left 3360.
I'm going to turn the autopilot off shortly, leaving the auto throttle on. Presently at 2,000 feet.
Southwest 3161, 8 miles from Blaver, maintain 3,000, so establish on the low class, clear ILS 115 right at present. Yeah, it's Southwest 3361, 2,000. Southwest 3361.
Alright, autopilot off. We're now going to manually fly the aircraft to the ground. The warning is telling me the autopilot is off. I will cancel that warning.
4896, contact tower 194.
Make the turn to the runway. Reduce my speed to 150 for landing. Increase my flaps. Gear down.
1432. Cross to your right, Bravo, and miles ground, traffic both. Bravo 4181, 10 degrees right, station. Order departure, definitely 125. Go on. Flag is 3718, runway 3 left to kilo. Stop at 49, turn right.
I should be now lined up for landing.
70. I'm heading 340, total 170, cover 49. Position 588, radio speed is 210.
On touchdown, it will obviously be reduced throttle to idle and reverse thrust and speed brakes. Switching the autopilot off, of course, just before landing. Auto throttle off so that I can reverse the thrust. little bit high at the moment, but better to be a little high than too low. Auto throttle off, engines to idle.
Fisher 588, reduce speed to 170.
400.
Speed to 170, 588. Kilo 4181, just going to maintain 2,500.
200.
Pull up.
100.
4181, turn left heading 180.
50, 40, 30, 20. Drive.
Good morning.
Reverse thrust, nose wheel down. Welcome to Cardiff. We'll just have a look at the replay of that landing. A little bit high on the nose, but I'm still getting used to this particular aircraft. This is the view from the control tower.